Is Zionism, which for our audience is a movement that started in 1897, originally for the reestablishment of and now the development and protection of the Jewish nation is in what is now called Israel. Is that ideology, Zionism, a colonial ideology? And is Israel a colonial state? I guess it's up to me, right?
I'll just go.
Yeah, I'm gonna go to him. You.
You know, the allegations of colonialism, this is another false narrative. And we have to stop the false narrative in order for us to break the cycle of violence. My philosophy, in fact, it's not only philosophy, it's the truth that falsehood lead to violence eventually. Because this is a snowball. It keeps rolling. Then it becomes believable. Then it spreads hatred. Like right now, to believe that Israel and the Jewish people did not belong to that part of the land, and they just came and kicked out, ethnically cleansed the Arabs, as many parrots been repeating without knowing anything about that region. 400 years of Ottoman occupation, systematic ethnic cleansing of the Jewish people from that region, to the point that no Jews left in that land. Then it was not coincidental that immediately after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, the Jewish people start returning to that point. Displaced from Europe, from the Arab countries, from everywhere after the atrocities of the Holocaust. People migrate because of drought, because of war, because of flooding, because of natural disasters. This is the natural flow of a human society. This is not about the United Nations laws. It's about the universal laws. When people are struggling for their very existence and they come for a refuge from human brutality that killed millions of them. And they have a history there. Artifacts, archaeology, Bibles, long history. While the others who don't want them to exist have no evidence of any relation to that territory. And still Israel say, and the Jewish people, we can coexist. We can coexist. Israel say, this is our historic land. But they don't have a problem coexisting with all other ethnicities, including Arabs, Druze, Christians, all type of people. And this is Israel today. It's a living example. You see the diversity of the human society in Israel, while you don't see it in the Arab societies.
Wow, you said so many things. Where do I start? You're arguing that there's a Jewish presence in the region that goes before the 20th and 19th century. Before history. And I'm saying, yes, of course there is. Relax. I'm saying there is. You spent a great deal of time arguing a straw man. I agree. There's a long-standing, uninterrupted Jewish presence in the region. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. You're framing that as if that's the dispute. We all agree with that. Do we? And no, but here, okay.
Well,
it's cool. I don't feel away. I just want y'all to get it out.
no, I don't want you to get it out.
Oh.
Go ahead. You can get it out afterwards.
That's not the argument. I disagree with you on some dates. You know, I don't think the Zionist movement begins. Actually, let me take one step back. It is important to mark what we mean by Zionism. We're talking about political Zionism, not cultural Zionism, not religious Zionism, not spiritual Zionism. Which is why I disagree with the idea of saying, you know, there's no Palestine until there's no country, so it's not real. It's like there was an Israel before there was a country of Israel. Similarly, there's a Palestine before there was a country of Palestine. That's not what it's predicated upon. People say next year in Jerusalem for centuries. That's a real thing. And that's not what people are mad at. That's not what people are resisting. What people are resisting is the wave of political Zionism that begins at the end of the 19th century, not in 1897, which is the beginning of the World Zionist Organization, then called the Zionist Organization, but in 1882 at the beginning of the first Aliyah. And that first Aliyah was an important one, a largely unsuccessful one, but it was a powerful one, and it wasn't a response to the Holocaust. Hitler hadn't rose to power when the first Aliyah begins. It was a response to Jew hate around the world. It was a response to the pogroms in Ukraine, to Poland, in Russia. We could go back to the 15th century in Spain. There's never been a moment where Jewish people have been safe around the world. We have to be honest about that. There's no dispute about that. Again, we ain't got to argue about that because we're on the same page. The question is, when you make a safe haven and when you create a safe haven, what does it look like and at whose expense does it come? We can say it's not colonial, but that's not what Herzl said. He said colonialism is a colonial adventure. If you read The Iron Wall by Vladimir Jabotinsky, when we talk about sort of move toward revisionist Zionism, he says it's colonial. There was a department of colonialism inside of the early Yishuv. So even the Zionists said it was colonial. What they said was that the colonialism was necessary, not that it wasn't. And the reason why it's a problem is not because Jews came to a place where they never were, but we will acknowledge at the end of the first Aliyah, the percentage of Jewish people it was about 5%. And by the time we get to 1939 with the British White Paper, the numbers have gone up. I'm just getting my time back from the groans. And so at that moment, that was not a natural demographic shift. That was an intentional effort to bring people in, which is not the problem. The question is, how do people come in and at whose expense? And that's what I hope we talk about.
Okay, can I just have, before you end, I would just like to have you clarify in one sentence, what is the definition of colonialism to you?
I can't do that in one sentence.
Okay.
And I don't want you to feel like I'm violating the rules.
All right.
I'll cover it in my next answer. I'm not being difficult. I want to give you a good, thorough answer.
There was not only a state of Israel prior to 1948, there were kingdoms, Jewish kingdoms in that region, and the ruins still actually erect, and they are witnessing to the presence and the history, the Jewish kingdoms in Judea and Samaria up to today. The currency is still the same. The Israeli shekel is more than 5,000 years ago. It's the same Bible, same history, it's the same lineage. It's not the Jewish people's fault that they were displaced so many times and sent to exile because they were anchored in their own truth. This is something I respect very much about the Jewish people. And this is why I choose to stand with the Jewish people now, because their identity is solid. And nobody can argue against it, even though many forces tried to annihilate them throughout the history. They continue to be resilient to time and space. Hence, Israel is not limited to a territory. It's not only from the river to the sea. It's an amazing phenomenon. And when they return, whenever they are in that land, they erect some magnificent civilization. Every time. Then the world conspire against them somehow, and they want to destroy it. From Babylon to the Egyptians, to the Romans, now to the Arabians. Before that was the Turks. So do we really want to measure this by how many Jewish people were there during like a certain period of time? They have been there. And so many forces could not erase them off the map like Iran's trying to do today.
So you're trying to say that Jewish people are resilient? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're going to get to that.
No, but it's my response. He went first this time. You're just used to me going first. Ping pong. It's my.
I think you had your second.
No, I haven't.
Am I wrong on that?
No.
Please, my apologies. I don't mean to cut you off.
I know you don't. You're arguing that Jewish people are resilient and that they've always been there, and that Jewishness doesn't isn't limited now to the Israeli nation state, correct? It seems to be exactly what I'm saying too. Again, we're arguing straw men. I'm saying that a people's nationhood isn't limited by a nation state. I just want you to have that same energy for Palestinians, right? You can be a people without having a physical nation state. There are thousands of nations in the world and only 132 nation states. So lots of people don't have countries. I agree. I never said that you measure people by how many people are in the region. The question was this colonial? And the answer is yes. And what I'm saying is Theodore Herzl, who I would argue, you may disagree, I would argue knows something about Zionism, says it was colonial. Zev Jabotinsky, who I think knows something about Zionism, Chaim Weizmann, who knows something about Zionism, they all said it was colonial. It's only now in the modern era that we're saying that it's not. And the reason why I resisted to answer your question initially was because I want to be very specific. It's a very particular type of colonialism because Israel was not a colonial power. They had the authority and the backing for a long time, up until about 1936, maybe 39, depending on how you think about it, of the British. It's a settler colonial project. A colonial project is to come in and exploit people, to come in and dominate. A settler colonial project is where you come in to replace the people who are there through processes of extraction and erasure and removal. You're saying, yeah, they've had the same language, but modern Hebrew is a 20th century construct, right? Tel Aviv is a modern construct. That's not a bad thing. We need modern constructs, but let's not pretend that the creation of these things was not a direct response to the erasure of Palestinian people, Palestinian culture, Palestinian life in the region. That is what makes it settler colonial. They settled and they colonized. And again, nobody who was actually doing the colonizing denied it. They literally had a department for it. They had description of it. Jabotinsky and Herzl explained how and why they were colonizing. And now we're just pretending that didn't happen.
So if I'm getting you right, you're saying that a settler colonial project is what Herzl, of replacing the people there in the land, is what their colonialism was. That's what they meant by that colonialism.
I'm not saying that's what they meant. I'm saying that's literally what they said. They literally said that initially Jabotinsky, if you read the Iron Wall, says, what? I'd like coexist. I'm not trying to get rid of anybody. But he also acknowledged that no people, and he gave other examples of colonization around the world. He said no people is just going to let this happen. They're going to fight back. He said the success of this project hinges upon the response, not on what we do, but on what the Arabs do in response. And he said, then he told you what they were going to do. If you read the work of Benny Morris, who might be, I would argue, the preeminent Israeli historian, he said that the Zionist project was dependent upon what? Transfer, which is a fancy, warm and fuzzy word of saying expulsion. Okay. Which he says. I'm not speaking for him. He says it.
Because of time. Thank you.